The cold wind howled like a wild beast across the alien planet. Snow fell without mercy, covering the ground in thick white layers. A human man named Carter stumbled through the snow, each step slower than the last. His breath turned into clouds, and his fingers felt like stone. His thermal suit had stopped working hours ago, and now his body was losing the fight. The sun had set behind the sharp mountains, and the sky was now black. He was alone, lost, and freezing. This planet was never meant for humans, not without shelter, not without heat. Carter's lips were cracked, and his vision blurred. He had crashed during a mission, separated from his team. Now, all he could hear was the wind and the soft crunch of snow under his boots. Each step felt like lifting a mountain. His knees gave out, and he dropped into the snow. The cold bit his skin like knives, and his heart slowed. I can't, he whispered, but even his voice was weak. He closed his eyes, ready to let go, ready to sleep forever. Then something moved in the shadows. A soft crunch, not like his steps, lighter, quicker, careful. Carter's eyes opened halfway, and he saw a shape through the snow. A figure stepped closer, wrapped in strange cloth. With glowing blue eyes, she was not human, that much was clear. Her skin had a pale shimmer, and her face was covered by a scarf. She knelt beside him and tilted her head, curious. "You are dying," she said in a soft voice. "You will not survive this night alone." Carter tried to speak, but only coughed. He didn't understand her language completely, but he knew what she meant. She opened the flap of a long sleeping bag made from thick fur. Without smiling, without fear, she spoke again. "If you want to live, come inside." Carter blinked, unsure if this was real. Why would an alien girl help him when her kind hated humans? But her voice held no trick, no lies. She waited as he slowly, painfully, crawled toward the bag. He expected her to back away, to laugh, to vanish. She didn't. Instead, she helped him slide inside the sleeping bag beside her. Their bodies touched, warm against cold, and he gasped. She was warm, so very warm, like fire under her skin. For a long moment he said nothing, just breathed. The warmth flowed into his frozen limbs, slowly waking them. He closed his eyes again, but this time, not to die. She watched him carefully, her hand resting near a small hidden blade. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she was here anyway, sharing her warmth, her shelter, her safety. "What's your name?" he asked softly, voice shaking. She looked at him, thinking for a moment. "Lyrian," she said at last, then added, "Do not tell anyone I helped you." He nodded. "Carter," he said, "just Carter." They lay there in silence, the storm raging outside. Inside the bag, it was quiet. The only sound was their breath. He could feel her heartbeat, steady and calm, and hers, faster, nervous, as if unsure if she had made a mistake. Minutes passed, maybe hours, he wasn't sure. Carter's body stopped shivering, and he finally felt alive again. But his mind was full of questions. Why did she help him? Why risk herself? And why did her voice sound so sad? "I saw your crash," she said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "I watched from the rocks. I waited to see what you would do." He turned his head slightly. "Why help me?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Because you did not scream or shoot when you saw me." He remembered now he had seen her just before passing out. He had raised his hand, but not his weapon, she had noticed. And that tiny choice had saved his life. Lyrian looked at the fabric of the sleeping bag and tightened it around them. "If my people find us like this," she said slowly, "they will kill us both." Carter didn't answer, just stared at her in the dim light. He wanted to ask so much, but he didn't want to break the moment. She had shared the only thing she had, warmth. And now, in the middle of the frozen night, she was his only hope. And maybe, just maybe, he was hers too outside. The storm screamed louder, but inside the bag, two strangers lay side by side, not as enemies, not as friends, but something in between. And neither of them knew what would come with the morning. Carter woke up with a sharp breath, the sleeping Bag was still around him, still warm. But something was wrong. Lyrian was not inside. The space beside him was empty, her heat already fading. He pushed himself up, heart beating faster. Outside the bag, the world was still white and cold. The snow falling soft but steady. Then he saw her, standing just outside the small rock overhang they had used for shelter. She had her arms crossed, her head tilted toward the sky, like she was listening to something he couldn't hear. Her silver eyes didn't blink, and her whole body was still. When he stepped out and called her name, she didn't turn. Instead, she spoke softly, as if afraid the air might carry her voice away. "They're coming," she said. "Not yet, but soon." Carter frowned. "Who's coming?" She didn't answer right away. Her hand touched the necklace around her neck, a dull metal ring, old and cracked, but she held it like it meant everything. "My people will search for me," she finally said. "And if they find you here, I'll be punished." He looked at her confused. "But you saved me." She turned to him now, eyes sharp. "That means nothing to them." She walked past him and returned to the sleeping bag, sitting down slowly. Her shoulders were tense, her hands shaking just a little. Carter sat beside her, unsure of what to say. The silence between them grew heavier than the snow outside. After a while, Lyrian pulled something small from her pouch. It was a dried fruit, glowing faintly blue. She split it in half and handed him a piece. He looked at it, unsure if it was food. "It's safe," she said. "You won't like the taste, but it will help your strength." He bit into it, and she was right. It tasted like sour metal and dirt, but warmth spread in his stomach, steady and strong. He looked at her hands, covered in thin gloves made of woven plant fibers. She caught him staring and quickly hid them inside her coat. Carter smiled. "You don't have to hide." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I'm not already hiding everything?" That stopped him. She wasn't just hiding her hands, she was hiding her fear, her sadness, her reason for being out here at all. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning in his chest. "Why were you alone when you found me? What were you doing out here?" Lyrian's face froze, and for a long time she didn't answer. Then she said something he didn't expect. "I was supposed to be someone's bride," she whispered. "A political gift, nothing more." Carter blinked, unsure if he heard right. "But I ran," she continued. "I didn't want to be owned, not by him, not by anyone." Her voice broke at the end, and Carter looked away. He felt her pain, deep and real, like the cold. She had saved him, but maybe she was also trying to save herself. They sat together in silence again, the snow piling softly outside. Carter finally spoke, his voice low. "I don't care what they call you," he said. "You're not a gift, and you're not owned." For the first time, Lyrian smiled barely, but it was there. She looked at him with softer eyes, eyes that didn't shine with fear anymore. "Your kind talks too much," she said, teasing just a little. Carter chuckled. "Yeah, we do that." The moment was warm, safe, almost peaceful, but it didn't last. From somewhere deep in the snowy trees, a sharp howl echoed. Lyrian's smile vanished, and she stood up fast, grabbing her small blade. "That sound," she whispered. "It doesn't belong to anything friendly." Carter stood up too, his muscles still weak but alert. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she looked into the trees and said something that made his blood freeze. "It hunts by smell, and now it knows you're here." The cold no longer felt like the biggest danger. They packed their few things, Lyrian quickly tying the sleeping bag into a tight roll. She handed Carter a sharp stick, carved to a point. "It won't do much," she said, "but sometimes courage is sharper than weapons." He took it, gripping it tight. As they began to move through the snowy woods, Carter glanced at her. She wasn't just an alien girl anymore. She was something else entirely. And whatever happened next, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to leave her side. The snow was no longer quiet. Something heavy moved behind the trees. Slow but steady, the ground shook lightly with each step. Carter turned his head quickly. his breath fogging the air. Lyrian didn't speak, but her body tensed like a coiled spring. Her ears twitched slightly, reacting to sounds he couldn't hear. She motioned to him with a single hand, no words, just silent urgency. He followed close behind her, stepping only where she stepped. They moved deeper into the forest, past twisted roots and white-covered stones. The shadows around them thickened, and the wind carried strange scents. Carter felt like they were being watched from every direction. Then he saw it, just for a second, between the trees. A creature as tall as a house, dark fur, long arms, and eyes like fire. Its nose flared as it sniffed the air. Searching, Carter's foot hit a hidden branch, and it snapped loudly. The creature turned its head sharply and let out a growl that made Carter's bones shake. Lyrian grabbed his arm and pulled him fast. They ran, not toward safety, but downward toward a narrow gorge in the ice. She slid down first, using her blade to slow the fall. Carter followed, slipping and tumbling, landing hard. Pain shot through his leg, but he pushed it away. In the bottom of the gorge, the wind didn't reach them. Lyrian found a gap between frozen stones and shoved him inside. He squeezed into the narrow space, barely able to move. Lyrian followed and pressed close beside him, her hand covering his mouth. Above them, the creature roared, the sound echoing through the ice. They didn't breathe, didn't move, for long minutes. Only silence answered the growl. Then, slow scraping sounds came, claws against rock. The beast was climbing down, hunting in the cracks. Lyrian whispered so close to his ear it tickled. "If it finds us, we cannot outrun it." Carter's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He looked at her, barely able to see her face in the dim light, but her eyes were calm, sharp, ready. She was not like any alien he had ever met. She was brave in a way that didn't need shouting. She looked like she had faced fear many times and survived it. Suddenly, her hand moved, pressing something cold and round into his palm. It was a small glass sphere with light inside, glowing soft blue. "If I drop this," she whispered, "it will flash bright. It might scare it off." Carter stared at it, then whispered back, "Why not use it now?" She shook her head slowly, "Because we only get one chance, and if we waste it." She didn't finish the sentence. The scratching grew louder. A shadow passed over the gap where they had crawled in. The creature sniffed, snorted, growled low. Lyrian reached for her blade, her breath slow and steady. Carter could feel her body readying itself just in case. But the creature paused, turned, and slowly walked away. Each step faded into the distance, until all they heard again was wind. Lyrian exhaled, her shoulders dropping slightly. They waited longer, just to be sure. Finally, they crawled out, blinking into the soft white light of morning. Carter's leg throbbed, but he was alive, and so was she. They moved again, slower this time, heading east where the sun touched the ice. After some time, they reached a broken wall, an old outpost, now buried in snow. Lyrian stopped and pointed. "There," she said. "We rest there before night comes again." Carter limped beside her, the cold less dangerous now than what hunted them. As they entered the ruins, a strange feeling settled in his chest. Not just fear, not just exhaustion, but something else. He looked at Lyrian, not just as an alien anymore. She had become something more than that. She had saved his life twice. Now, and each time, she had risked her own. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing: he couldn't let her face it alone. Carter had never seen walls like these before. They weren't made of metal or stone, but some kind of smooth black glass. The ruin stood half buried in snow, leaning like a broken memory from the past. Lyrian stepped ahead of him, her boots silent on the frozen ground. She didn't speak, but her eyes moved fast, searching, remembering. This place meant something to her. That much was clear. Inside, the air changed. No more wind, no falling snow, only silence and a strange pressure in the air. Carter touched one of the walls and flinched. It was warm, not hot, but not cold either, like the place was alive, just barely. Lyrian stood still in the center of the room, her eyes closed. She whispered a few soft words in her own language, and the walls shimmered. Lines of light appeared across the black glass, pulsing. Slowly like a heartbeat, Carter stepped back, uneasy. "What is this place?" he asked. She opened her eyes, calm but distant. "This was my ancestors' temple," she said. "They called it the Echo House." Before Carter could ask more, he heard it. A whisper, faint and cold, brushing past his ear. He turned sharply. But no one was there. Another whisper followed, and then another. But the room was still, empty except for them. Lyrian stepped closer to him, her voice low. "The temple remembers," she said. "If your heart is loud, it listens." Carter didn't understand, but his skin prickled. He could feel something pressing against his thoughts. Memories surfaced: his childhood, his first ship launch. The sound of his sister's laugh, all at once, too fast, too bright. He staggered, breathing hard. Lyrian grabbed his hand, grounding him. "Don't listen too long," she warned. "Some voices lie. Some want you to stay forever." Carter nodded, still shaken. "Why bring me here?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "Because this place hides us, and because it shows truth." They found a corner where the glass was cracked, forming a shallow space to rest. Lyrian sat down first, and Carter followed. Their sleeping bag was unrolled between them, a small shared comfort in the ancient place. He could still hear faint voices in the background, like songs sung underwater. Lyrian didn't seem bothered, like she had grown up hearing them. As they ate the last of the glowing fruit she carried, Carter studied her face. He wanted to ask about her life, what it was like to grow up with powers like this, but he also didn't want to break the strange peace between them. She broke the silence instead. "I was brought here once as a child," she said, "but I wasn't allowed to touch the walls." "Why not?" he asked. "Because I already heard them," she answered, "and that scared them." The way she said it chilled him more than the cold. He looked at the wall again, at the lights, the whispers, the memories. This place wasn't just shelter. It was something else, something older than both of them. And now it was watching. Suddenly, the lights on the wall dimmed. Lyrian stood up fast, alarm flashing in her eyes. "They know we're here," she said, her voice sharp. "Who?" Carter asked, already rising. "My people," she said. "They've tracked the heat signal. They're close." Carter grabbed the bag, ready to run. But Lyrian stopped him. "Wait," she whispered. "There's one more thing." She walked to the center of the room again and touched the floor. A small panel opened, revealing a strange silver ring. Glowing with soft light, she took it, her hands shaking. "This belonged to the first who ran from the old ways," she said. "Now it's mine." Carter didn't know what that meant, but he understood the weight of it. Whatever she had just taken, it wasn't just a ring, it was a choice, a step away from everything her people expected. And now she had dragged him into it. They slipped out of the temple as snow began to fall again. Above them, in the distance, a small ship cut across the sky. No lights, no sound, but it was watching. Lyrian pulled her hood up and tightened the strap of her bag. "We keep moving," she said. "The real hunt hasn't started yet." Carter followed, but his mind stayed in that whispering room. Something inside him had changed, and he could feel it. He was no longer just a lost human soldier. He was part of something older, stranger, and far more dangerous than he ever expected. Carter's stomach growled loud enough to echo through the snow-covered valley. He held it with one hand, embarrassed, but Lyrian said nothing. She was quiet too, her steps slow, her face pale. They had gone 3 days without real food, only chewing on dried roots and frozen moss. Even her glowing fruit was gone, and now, the warmth that once filled the sleeping bag at night was fading. That evening, as the sky turned dark blue and the wind picked up again, she finally stopped. Walking, her legs trembled and her shoulders sagged. Carter caught her before she fell, his heart racing. "Lyrian," he said, "you need to rest," but her voice was weak and cracked. "No. If we stop now, We freeze. She tried to stand again, but her knees gave out. Carter knelt beside her and pulled the sleeping bag from his pack. Without a word, he unzipped it and wrapped it around her tightly. Then, for the first time, he slid in beside her on his own, not to survive, but to protect. The cold bit at his back, but he pressed against her body to give her whatever warmth he had left. She didn't protest this time, didn't speak, just closed her eyes and leaned into him. Hours passed slowly, the snow piling up around them like a cold blanket. Carter rubbed her arms, trying to keep her blood moving. Her skin was colder than before, and her breathing shallow. "You gave me your warmth back then," he whispered. "Now I'll give you mine." At one point, she opened her eyes halfway and whispered something in her language. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was soft, broken, and grateful. Her hand found his, and she didn't let go, even though they were both weak and shaking. There was something stronger between them now, not just survival, but something warmer, something real. The next morning, Carter forced himself to move. He gathered sticks and dry snowgrass and used his emergency kit to light a small fire. The flame barely lasted, but it gave enough heat to melt some snow into water. He lifted Lyrian's head and gave her a few drops. She coughed but swallowed. "You're not dying today," he said, more to himself than to her. Later, she sat up, slow and shaking. She looked at the fire, then at Carter, and for the first time, she looked scared, not of the cold or the creatures, but of him. "You're not like the stories," she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. "What stories?" "The ones about humans," she said. "Cold hearts, no care, only war." He laughed softly, then coughed from the dry air. "I'm not all humans," he said. "Just me." She didn't smile, but her hand squeezed his again. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down. That night, when the fire was gone and only stars lit the sky, Lyrian leaned her head on his shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. "If we don't find shelter tomorrow, I might not wake up." Carter looked at her and nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow," he said, "we find more than shelter, we find hope." Before she could answer, a faint humming sound came from the sky. They both froze, looking up. A patrol ship, small and dark, moved silently above the clouds, scanning the ground below. Lyrian's breath caught. "My people," she said. "They're looking for me." Carter grabbed the bag and helped her to her feet. "We move," he said. "Now." They started walking again, one step at a time. Behind them, the patrol ship slowed, turning its light toward the ground. Carter didn't stop, and Lyrian didn't fall. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Even if tomorrow brought chains instead of warmth, he wasn't letting go of her hand. Asterisk. The beam of light cut through the trees like a blade. It moved slow and silent, scanning everything in its path. Carter pulled Lyrian behind a frozen log, his arm across her chest. She didn't fight him, she was too weak to move, but her eyes stayed open, glowing faintly in the dark. "They're close," she whispered. "Too close." The ship hovered above, just low enough to feel its shadow. Then it shifted direction, and a shape dropped from underneath. A scout, tall and armored, landing hard in the snow with a dull thud. Carter watched. The figure, heart-pounding, the scout moved with slow confidence, holding a scanner in one hand. Its visor flashed blue, sweeping the snow where Carter and Lyrian had walked. Lyrian's breathing quickened. "If they find us, don't fight," she said quietly. "They'll kill you without a second thought." Carter didn't answer. His hand gripped the sharp stick he'd carved. Even though he knew it meant nothing against armor, he had no weapons, no backup, just cold muscles and a fire inside that refused to die. The scout turned, slowly stepping toward their hiding place. Each step closer made the log feel thinner, their silence louder. Lyrian's fingers tightened around Carter's wrist. He glanced at her, and in that moment, she looked more afraid for him than for herself. Suddenly, she stood, rising from behind the log. Carter tried to pull her back, but she had already stepped into the open. The scout froze, weapon halfway drawn. Lyrian raised both hands and spoke in her own language, her voice sharp and clear. "I surrender," she said. "I am the one you're looking for." The scout didn't lower his weapon. He spoke through the mask, words harsh and clipped. "You are not alone." Lyrian shook her head. "I am." The scout stepped forward, raising a scanner. Then his eyes locked onto Carter, still crouched. Behind the log, Carter stood slowly, his hands raised. He stepped out beside her, heart racing. The scout lifted his weapon, but Lyrian stepped in front of Carter. "No," she said, her voice full of heat. "You won't harm him." The scout hesitated. "He is human, and he saved me." She snapped back, twice. A long silence followed, the wind howled above, and the ship hovered quietly. Overhead, then the scout pressed a button on his wrist. A beam of blue light shot down from the ship, surrounding Lyrian and Carter. Carter reached for her hand. Unsure what was happening, she held it tight, whispering, "They're taking us." Up! The ship pulled them in with soft force, lifting them off the snowy ground. Inside, everything was metal and cold light. Lyrian was pushed away from him by two guards. Carter shouted, tried to reach her, but was slammed to the floor. A sharp pain shot through his back, but he didn't stop looking at her. Her eyes locked on his until the doors slid shut between them. They threw Carter into a holding cell. No windows, no warmth, just silence. He sat on the floor, breathing hard. He had nothing now, not even her voice. He didn't know where they had taken her or what they would do, but he knew one thing. He wasn't done, not yet. He hadn't come this far to lose her in silence. Hours passed, or maybe more. He heard distant voices, footsteps, commands he didn't understand. Then something small dropped from the ceiling vent, a tiny sphere. It rolled across the floor and stopped at his foot. Carter picked it up, and it blinked once. Then a message played in Lyrian's voice, low and hurried. "I'm in the East Wing. I don't have much time. If you hear this, I believe in you." His hand closed around the sphere, for the first time since the ship took. He smiled. She had sent him a signal, and now it was his turn to save her. The guards never expected a human to escape. They thought he was weak, broken, lost in a metal cage like a trapped animal. But Carter had learned from the cold, the snow, and from her. He moved quiet like the forest, eyes sharp like hers. The moment the cell door opened for a routine check, he acted. A sudden shove, a stolen keycard, and he ran. Alarms screamed through the ship like angry ghosts. Red lights blinked down the long halls. Carter ducked behind crates, slid beneath beams, and followed the map burned in his memory. East Wing, she had said. And he trusted her word more than any system or code. He passed signs in her alien language, but he didn't need to read them. His gut knew where to go. One wrong turn brought him face to face with two guards. They raised their weapons, shouting. Carter didn't slow down. He dove low, grabbing a loose pipe, and swung hard. One fell. The other missed his shot, and Carter kept moving. Pain flared in his shoulder, but he didn't stop. Finally, a narrow door at the end of a dark hall blinked. With soft blue light, he slammed the panel, and the door opened with a hiss. Inside, she sat alone, her arms chained to the wall. Her head lifted slowly, and when she saw him, her eyes widened. "You came," she whispered. He crossed the room in 2 steps, his hands shaking as he used the keycard to release her. She collapsed into his arms, weak but alive. "I knew you'd find me," she said. He held her close. "You gave me no choice," she smiled, even through the pain. Together they moved, her leaning against him, down the halls, past broken alarms and fallen guards. The ship rocked. The crew had noticed too late. They reached the bay doors, sealed tight with a warning light. But Lyrian raised her hand, her skin glowing faintly. The ring she had taken from the temple pulsed with heat. She placed it against the panel, and the door unlocked with a slow hiss. The bay opened to icy wind and a long drop to the snowy mountains below. There, she said, pointing to an emergency pod. They climbed inside just as another alarm screamed from above. Carter hit the launch button, and the pod blasted downward. Flames and wind roared around them, shaking the tiny shell. Lyrian leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "We're free." The pod hit the ground hard but didn't break. Snow exploded around them, and silence followed. When the hatch opened, fresh air rushed in. They stepped out into the open wild, cold but alive. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Carter laughed, a full breath of relief. She joined him, the sound soft and strange and beautiful. They walked together through the snow, holding onto each other. No more running, no more hiding that night. Under the stars, they set up a small fire. The same sleeping bag lay between them. Lyrian crawled in first, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're warm now," she said. "Maybe too warm." Carter smiled and slid in beside her. "I guess you'll have to cool me down," he teased. She rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. Their hands met in the middle of the bag, fingers interlocked. Snow fell quietly outside, but inside the bag, there was only warmth, not just from the body, but from something deeper, something they had earned together. In a world full of cold and war, two hearts had found shelter in each other.